On the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz comes an unprecedented exhibition about one of history's darkest moments. Auschwitz, not long ago, not far away, features more than 500 original objects, first-hand accounts, and survivor testimonies that tell the powerful story of the Auschwitz concentration camp, its history and legacy, and the underlying conditions that allowed the Holocaust to happen. On now exclusively at ROM. Tickets at rom.ca.
We're just getting this announcement from Global Affairs Canada and the Office of Minister Ahmed Hussein, International Development Minister, saying that they have taken a look at that sort of partial interim report by the UN Office of Internal Oversight Services into UNRWA. It's not finalized.
That's some of the news coverage from about a year ago in March of 2024, when the Canadian government announced it will resume funding UNRWA, the UN's Palestinian Refugee Agency, despite the agency confirming that 9 of its employees in Gaza may have been involved in the October 7th attack that killed 1,200 Israelis. The Center for Israel and Public Affairs, CIJA, quickly swung into action. It filed a lawsuit against the Canadian government, demanding a judicial review in federal court of the Cabinet's decision to start up funding again. Some of the families of the Canadian victims also joined CIJA's lawsuit. The case is still going ahead, and it's just one of the more high-profile legal files that CIJA's taken on since October 7th, the work done for free, pro bono, by the organization's LTF, or Legal Task Force, a rapid response team made up of about 300 Canadian lawyers from across the country. And while it sounds like the title of a new courtroom drama on TV, in fact, much of the work is done quietly, behind the scenes, helping Jewish Canadians fight antisemitism in their workplaces, at schools, by their unions, on campus, and even in hospitals, because of the explosion of antisemitism here in Canada since October 7th. The Legal Task Force members have helped an astonishing 550 people in just 17 months. They get about 10 to 20 new cases every month, and it's not slowing down. And while some can be dealt with perhaps with just a lawyer's letter or with having one of the lawyers attend a disciplinary hearing for the client, there are about 24 ongoing complicated cases, including the UNRWA lawsuit. But you might have also heard about some of the other ones. Lawsuit against the Public Servants Alliance of Canada, one against the Toronto Metropolitan University for $1.3 million because of a toxic atmosphere for a Jewish student on campus. And there's also a court appeal of the University of Windsor's deal with its pro-Palestinian encampment protesters. Now, the task force mainly handles civil cases, not criminal ones. And although they call themselves a legal rapid reaction force, they know the wheels of justice move slowly.
And what we see is the rise of anti-Semitic behavior, a permission. But what the hope and the accomplishments is that we are making people behave. And we hope to also, through education and other means, change the hearts and minds. But in the meantime, we are changing their behavior.
I'm Ellen Besner, and this is what Jewish Canada sounds like for Wednesday, March 12th, 2025. Welcome to the CJN Daily, a podcast of the Canadian Jewish News, made possible in part thanks to the generous support of the Ira Gluskin and Maxine Granovsky Gluskin Charitable Foundation. CIJA's Legal Task Force is run out of Ontario with hubs of legal volunteers in Vancouver, Calgary, and Montreal, and they're looking for more lawyers to join the team. The story is interesting because it shows how the Jews have to resort to the courts and the legal system to fight for their equal rights now, instead of relying on elected politicians and union leaders, university presidents, or school boards to take anti-Semitism seriously. Right now, for example, the CIJA Task Force is helping a group of pro-Israel Jewish parents at Rawlinson Elementary in the Toronto District School Board. They won an election to sit on the Parents' Council, but other parents who don't support Zionism want the election results annulled. The case is going to court for a judicial review. It's scheduled to be heard in May. To find out more about why Canada's Jewish political advocacy agency created its own legal SWAT team, I'm joined by the task force's co-chair, Nanette Rosen. She's a retired Department of Justice prosecutor, and also by Richard Marceau. He's a lawyer by profession and CIJA's general counsel.
Thank you for having me.
Glad to be here.
The task force itself is not new, right? It's been around for a while before October 7th. Give us a little bit of the background.
So about 8-9 years ago, the Legal Task Force was created out of Toronto to pool resources of lawyers who wanted to contribute to the Jewish community. And then it expanded across Canada. But the focus was on three things. Some cases, you might have heard the food vendors case, that cafe who had the Zionist not welcome sign. So that's the case that let's call it LTF 1.0 dealt with. The Legal Task Force, exactly. Two, we did legal conferences to train lawyers on different issues, a continuing legal education for lawyers. And three, the Legal Task Force 1.0 was also a great brain trust for CIJA when there was legislation that was tabled and we wanted to have access to great minds. But then October 7th happened and then everything changed.
How many cases would you have been working on per year, let's say? And then what happened October 7th, I think, must have changed your numbers.
4 or 5 cases a year, perhaps, that would go forward. And then October 7th happened. And myself and all members of our community and all members involved in Jewish organizations all had to reinvent what it is they had initially signed up for and what they were now asked to do.
Did you at the time have any clue to the amount of cases that you would now be working on?
No, we did not. Nobody expected that tsunami of Jew hatred. Immediately, we start to get emails and phone calls from people in the school system, from campus, people in unions and in everywhere saying, we need your help. And so we had to set things up differently. And all this led by a steering committee co-chaired by Nanette, who would have an overview of all the activities. And I know it sounds like a cliche, Len, I know, but we're literally building the plane as it was taking off, while at the same time seeing all the advocacy work that needed to be done at the same time. So it was chaotic, but lots of work got done from the very, very beginning.
While the lawyers provide their work pro bono, nevertheless, UJA has come up with funding with respect to disbursements and it sounds pedantic, I guess, and costs that are associated. And so we have transparency, and we in fact do know that we've probably helped over 300 individuals. It's important to note that it's not just Jewish members of our community. It can be our allies. So when people who are non-Jewish, who have come forward and supported us and spoken publicly in support of Israel, or members of the Jewish community, they too have been the subject of hatred, and we have represented them pro bono.
Are there also lawyers, speaking of which, who are not Jewish?
Yes, there
allies
are.
Who are part of your legal task force?
Yes, there are. It doesn't make you popular at cocktail parties. They deserve all our respect, all our kavod.
Latest number was actually more than 500.
Some of it is just having a lawyer at the initial stages of some problem. Second, if it doesn't get solved that way, then you escalate. Thirdly is political action. When
we help people on an individual basis, members of our community or our allies, there's a respect for their confidentialities. We don't advertise. We don't toot our own horn. What we do is we listen to those individual people who are aggrieved. We provide empathy. We provide legal assistance, and we provide a confidential way by which they can act. And they also get to change their minds. So, for instance, when we have a parent who comes to us where their child has been the subject of antisemitism, and they say initially, we want to go to court. And then we tell them what that's about. And they go, well, maybe we don't want to court. We want to meet with the administration. And we say, okay, we'll provide some. And they, well, actually, no, let me think about it. So what we do is we listen to the needs and the concerns of the community, and we do what they say in a respectful fashion.
There are, though, some cases where the subjects have gone public. So the student at Toronto Metropolitan University who sued for a toxic atmosphere of anti-Semitism, you guys were involved in that. Where is that?
Last April, we issued a statement of claim. That's taken by David Rosenfeld, an excellent lawyer at Koski-Minsky. So that was a statement of claim. There was a statement of defense, and we responded. And now we're, as you know, the wheels of justice can be slow to turn, but the court date has not been set, but have to follow the usual course. So that is one. There's actually two cases at Toronto Metropolitan University for antisemitism.
One is a professor, I think, right?
Correct. So one is faculty, the other is student. And we have the University of Windsor. So the University of Windsor, which is one of the only, if not the only university in Canada that caved in, that capitulated to the demand of the encampment. We made a complaint under the Ontario Business Discriminatory Practices Act. The deputy minister, so it's not a political decision, it's not a political echelon, rejected our complaint saying that act did not apply. So we're doing a judicial review of this. So that's where it's at. So it's in front of the Ontario Court to judicially review this. So we have now 3 acting cases related to campus.
And you have UNRWA.
When the Canadian government decided to renew funding for UNRWA, which is a Hamas-infested UN organization, we took the Canadian government to court for judicial review, saying that it was patently unreasonable. The government tried to, at the early stage, kick us out, saying that we had no case. That was rejected by the federal court. So the case is proceeding. So we have an important case, CIJA and family members of victims of October 7 that are taking our own government to court. And to me, at least, it's very sad that we have to go to court to ensure that Canadian money does not go to an organization that is so linked and infested by Hamas. It shouldn't be that way. It should have been an easy decision for Ottawa to say, you know what, the Palestinians deserve humanitarian aid, but not through UNRWA.
On the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz comes an unprecedented exhibition about one of history's darkest moments. Auschwitz, not long ago, not far away, features more than 500 original objects, first-hand accounts, and survivor testimonies that tell the powerful story of the Auschwitz concentration camp, its history and legacy, and the underlying conditions that allowed the Holocaust to happen. On now exclusively at ROM. Tickets at rom.ca.
It's important to note that while we wish that we had many, many more cases that potentially we could take strategically, and we would want to soothe our community and satisfy our community, nothing goes out before we can be sure that there is a real argument, that there's a foundation, that there's the evidence in place. And so while it's not fast, it is of quality. And the second piece I want to mention to defend the legal system, where Richard talks about the fact that our legal cases go slowly. It's true that they go slowly, but in the meantime, they provide a very important purpose. If I may, as a former prosecutor, sort of a riff on sentencing principles. We have both specific deterrence and general deterrence. So when those cases go forward, they impact the institution and ask them to behave and make them accountable. But there's also the principle of general deterrence. So when we take on one of the universities, like the University of Windsor or like TMU, we have a chilling effect on other institutions where they reflect on whether or not how they want to conduct themselves, how they want to treat their Jewish students, how they want to respond to BDS requests. So we wish the litigation was fast and swift with good results, but they provide an important deterrent effects, both specific and general, as they're going through the court system.
Can you tell us why you feel this is so necessary, the court way to get what we deserve?
So, Hélène, I know we speak to a member of a prominent legal family. There has been a systemic failure of governments at all levels and of law enforcement to protect the Jewish community across the country. And we have touched the limits of the advocacy only era. And now we have to use more tools, or at least use them more aggressively than we used to in the past. I was having similar conversations with our colleagues at ADL from the US, who also have basically set up their own law firm within the ADL context, because they also are touching this. Our governments have failed to protect the Jewish community. Our governments, our institutions, for example, campus, have failed to enforce their own policy. Because when you look at the TMU case on behalf of the student, when you drill down, bottom line is that they have policies, they're good policy, that they have not applied them correctly, and that is an issue. So we're taking them, or we want to make sure that they're accountable for their failure to apply and to enforce their own policies. The same thing for law enforcement. There are laws, there are bylaws that are on the books that have not been used for reasons unknown, that could have put a damper on the anti-Israel, anti-Semitic stuff that we've seen in the streets that we should not have seen. There was a way to stop that before had we used the laws that are already on the books.
And to your question, why should we? I'll use a phrase from our Israeli family, Ein Brera. We have no choice. We have to use all the tools that are available to counter the anti-Semitism.
You didn't want to talk about criminal stuff yet, but let's talk about it now. How, if at all, are your legal task force members involved in the day-to-day and criminal code stuff, as opposed to the institutional stuff?
So we have great experts, great criminal lawyers. Mark Fryman, of course, is one of them. We have Joe Neuberger, John Rosen, and a few others who have been quite helpful on that front. But now we're organizing better. Other lawyers other legal Jewish organizations are working with CIJA, Canadian Lawyers Against Antisemitism. There's ACLA as well. So we're getting more organized, again, because there's been a failure of that. But, to your question, when we're at a point that in 2024, Canada, the community needs to go to court to get injunctions to protect our schools, to protect our synagogues, to protect our community centers. Something has gone wrong, and we should not need to do that. That is a failure of the authorities, being municipal, provincial, and federal, to ensure that our community is safe. We're using courts now because there was no choice to ensure that our rights are protected and that the promise of Canada to the Jewish community is realized and protected.
We've had Jewish students being charged on campus who have been swept up in protests. And again, we have quietly but appropriately represented them.
I want to just ask, of all the social sections of society where you guys are seeing cases or people needing help, is there one that is the worst? Or has it changed since the 15 months? Maybe it's quieter now. I don't know.
K-12 campus unions.
Is there anything that gives you hope?
There's hope in our community being resilient. There's hope in the great people that I've seen step up. People who were disengaged before and now are stepping up. I could, here I'm thinking a lot of the work that's been done in unions, because you talked, Elaine, rightly about the proceedings against QP and against PSAC and against OPSU. What has not been as covered is the work that's being done by Jewish union members who before were disengaged and now are fighting back against anti-Semitism in their own unions. I see a renaissance of Jewish pride, of people being more out Jews, sometimes despite being afraid and wanting to stand up. And to me, that's one of the big lessons. Like, we can advocate, we can demonstrate in the streets, we can write letters to the editor, we can send letters, we can do advocacy work, we can do legal work, we can complain to this or that, but nothing replaces a Jew who stands up, a Jew who has her or his head held high and knows their place in Canada as full citizens with rights that need to be protected by the authorities, and will stand up for themselves, because even though we have allies and they're very, very important, we need to stand up for ourselves more than we ever had. And we're seeing, I certainly from where I stand, more and more of that, and that gives me a lot of hope.
I would say we're on a journey. I'd like to, do a riff on Naseh v'nishma. So with respect to the idea of first the conduct and then the understanding, what we are doing and what we have is make people behave, whether or not they're anti-Semitic in their hearts. And we can see that there's been the incubation of anti-Semitism. And we hope to also, through education and other means, change the hearts and minds. But in the meantime, we are changing their behavior.
Do you think that just by putting them through the court system and having them to get their briefs and their affidavits and making them spend money on this, they actually pay attention? The outcome may be a long time down the road, as you said, but the process, does that have any help as well too?
Yes, it does. It changes the behavior, and it provides also a general deterrence when other people make the decision whether or not to engage in such behavior. That's harder to measure, but it's equally important. And there's the possibility of settlement all through the whole procedure. But in the meantime, it sends a message. And I think the other piece that sends a message is we're not going to retreat from the institutions. We are going to participate in the public universities. We are going to participate at the public hospitals, in the workplaces. We are not going to self-ghettoize ourselves. We are here to stay, and we are going to, as Canadian citizens, and most importantly, with allegiances to Israel. We're not going undercover. We're not being stealth. We can choose to be in those public institutions. We can choose to live in Mississauga, for instance, and our child may have to go to school under the Peel education system, which we've had tremendous difficulty in all kinds of anti-Semitic activities. But a Jew has a right to live in Mississauga, and a Jew has a right to send their child to the public school there.
Back to you. It takes a lot of courage for your plaintiffs or your complainants or your test case people to do this.
It's not fun, and that's been one of the challenges. People saying, yes, you have to sue this or that, but then I don't want to put my name forward. I'm afraid for whatever reason. That is why, I'm in awe of the young woman who's suing TMU, of the Jewish union members who are taking on OPSU, PSAC, and QP, the Jewish faculty member who's taking on TMU. So it takes courage. It shouldn't, but it does. But and yet it can have an impact. And you were asking earlier about victories. We were granted intervener status in the UFT injunction case. CIJA and UJ were represented by the excellent Mark Ross, great litigator, and we won. And when the encampment was taken down, it had a domino effect across the country. Within a very short time, every encampment was gone. One notable exception, and we talked about it earlier, is University of Windsor, who decided to capitulate shamelessly to the encampment. But legal action does have an impact. But it's not the be-all, end-all. It's one tool, an important tool, but one tool in a toolbox to fight anti-Semitism.
They are the heroes of the narrative, and we distinguish ourselves because they put their names on legal documents, and they don't wear masks. They stand forward in full view.
Never ending. Listen, guys, it's been an eye-opener. I really appreciate it. You'll keep us posted on how these cases are going. I'm sure we'll hear about it.
Well,
thank you for having us.
And that's what Jewish Canada sounds like for this episode of the CJN Daily, made possible in part by the generous support of the Ira Gluskin and Maxine Granovsky-Gluskin Charitable Foundation. Now, this CIJA Legal Task Force isn't the only one doing this kind of work. The Lawfare Project, run by Canadian Brooke Goldstein out of New York, has almost 1,000 attorneys at their disposal, and they launch lawsuits on behalf of pro-Jewish and pro-Israel clients and activists. There's also the new Canadian Jewish Law Association, just launched, with criminal lawyer Joseph Neuberger of Toronto as its founder, and there's the Toronto-based Diamond and Diamond firm. They launched a class action lawsuit against 15 universities for how they treated their Jewish students since October 7th. We put the link in our show notes for anyone who thinks they need free legal help from CIJA. Our show is produced by Zachary Judah Kaufman. The executive producer is Michael Freeman. Managing editor is Mark Weisblatt. And the music is by Dov Beck-Levine. Thanks for listening.
On the 80th anniversary of the liberation of Auschwitz comes an unprecedented exhibition about one of history's darkest moments. Auschwitz, Not Long Ago, Not Far Away, features more than 500 original objects, first-hand accounts, and survivor testimonies that tell the powerful story of the Auschwitz concentration camp, its history and legacy, and the underlying conditions that allowed the Holocaust to happen. On now exclusively at ROM. Tickets at rom.ca.